GTX Shipbuilding Company has not been engaged in the creation of new vessels for many years. Now this corporation mainly resells products. When a recession hits in the United States, GTX management has to make a difficult decision and lay off several thousand people. Moreover, not only ordinary employees, but also branch managers fall under the reduction. Bobby Walker was in sales. He was in good standing, and one of the GTX creators, Gene McClary, promised him that he would not be affected by the reduction. However, when Bobby came to work again, Sally Wilcox informed him that he was fired. Bobby felt like an asteroid had hit him. He tried to contact Gene, but he was unavailable. He was in Chicago, telling financial analysts about the state of affairs in their corporation. The reduction was carried out during his departure so that Gene could not interfere with it. He was sure that it was better for the management to reduce personal expenses than to dismiss employees. Returning to the head office and learning that Sally Wilcox, on behalf of the head of the company, James Sullinger, had closed several branches and fired valuable employees, Gene became angry. He burst into James' office and started an argument with him in front of strangers. I had to interrupt the meeting to have a frank conversation. And Sullinger said that all the cuts were justified and he was not going to change anything. Bobby returned home and told his wife the sad news. His relationship with Maggie was already strained, and then there was the dismissal. Bobby's children also felt this change. The eldest son already understood everything, but the daughter could only guess that hard times were ahead of them. Phil Woodward avoided being fired. However, he was not particularly happy about this, because he understood that he would easily become the next on the list of abbreviations. When he returned home, he found his wife in the bedroom with a headache. They had dinner with Sullinger planned for the evening, so she had to summon the willpower and go with her husband. Gene should be at this dinner too, but he doesn't want to go. And my wife is always talking about new purchases. She has already purchased a table worth several $1,000s. Looking at this table, Gene understood that it could be someone's quarterly salary. Bobby and Maggie have a visit planned too. They go on a holiday to Maggie's brother, Jack Dolan, and his wife. Jack is a construction worker, and he despises what Bobby does for a living. He believes that all these managers and other loafers get fabulous money for nothing. Because of such disagreements, heated arguments break out between Jack and Bobby from time to time. However, Bobby doesn't want to swear today. No one except his wife knows about his dismissal yet, and it's better if it stays that way. There were so many unemployed people that it was not easy to find a good position. Bobby joined a company that helps with the selection of an employer. They teach you how to talk to HR staff, how to write resumes, and other things. Besides Bobby, 2 other GTX employees came here. After completing a motivational seminar, Bobby took a seat next to a guy named Danny and began calling potential employers. He and Danny became friends right away. How's the orientation? Yes, this is some kind of antediluvian zombification. He was a simple man who did not give in to despair, despite unemployment. Meanwhile, things weren't going particularly well at GTX. The stock price was falling. It has become more difficult to work because the number of employees has decreased, and their responsibilities have been divided among the remaining ones. Gene suggested to Bobby that they meet, but the conversation didn't work out. Bobby was angry at his former boss and said he would regret leaking it. While he was talking to Gene, Maggie conducted an audit and realized that they would have to cut costs significantly, otherwise they would not be able to survive in the current financial situation. On the same day, Bobby's parents found out that their son was now unemployed. He had to justify himself. Jin's conscience finally tortured him. His wife flew on vacation on a private jet of the company. They lived in relative luxury, while good people were out of work. Gene didn't like the current situation, but he didn't know how to change it yet. Therefore, he decided to drown out his conscience by going to the left. He and Sally were having an affair. Bobby started going to job interviews. In one of the companies, he was kept in the waiting room for a long time, and when it came to discussing salary, it turned out that he would receive many times less than in his previous job. Bobby didn't realize yet that he needed to seize every opportunity. Therefore, he was rude to the HR specialist and left. And between you and me, you don't have to drink Diet Coke. It won't help you. To vent his negativity, he went to play golf. And when I returned to my current colleagues, they suggested skipping foam circles after a whole day of employers calling. Bobby agreed. He didn't have any plans for the evening anyway. At the same time, Sullinger was showing the company's management the new building that GTX was building. There is also a place for an office for Jin, but he's not happy about it. With the money spent on the construction of an entire office building, it was possible to support laid-off employees for some more time. Bobby's son realized that from now on their lives would change forever, and he didn't have any fun at all. My father had to talk to him. Bobby gradually began to get closer to his son, and that was the only positive thing that happened after he was fired. When he, Maggie, and the kids arrived at their parents' house for dinner, Jack was there too. He accidentally found out that Bobby had been fired and offered him a job for him. However, Bobby refused, and he did it rather rudely. He didn't want to receive handouts from someone who had been laughing at him for many years. GTX was preparing new abbreviations. It was necessary to prepare another list of employees who should be fired. Instead, Gene suggested to moderate the expenses of the management. However, Sullinger did not like this idea. He was not at all satisfied with the behavior of his old friend lately. Maggie decided to take up her old job at the hospital. She also arranged with a realtor to have their house appraised. They can no longer afford the mortgage payments, which means they will have to sell the Batcave and move in with their parents. For Bobby, this turnaround was on the verge of a nightmare. He didn't want to live with his ancestors again and force his wife to work. When he arrived at the golf club to play with friends, he was informed that the fees had not been paid for a long time, which meant he should not be here. Cut Maggie's family expenses, and Bobby got really mad. He wrote a check to the club staff and then came to his wife's place of work to make a scandal. Bobby was trying to create an image of a successful person, so he kept his old habits. The Billionaires Club? We have everything according to plan. Otherwise, no one will want to hire him. Soon after this quarrel, Bobby realized that he had nothing more to wait for. All attempts to find a job were unsuccessful. So he sold his Porsche and decided to start his career from scratch. At the same time, Phil Woodward learned that he had been fired. He complained about this to Jean, who went to deal with Sally, but she couldn't cancel her dismissal order. Moreover, Jean himself was reduced. The company no longer needed his services. Despite the current situation, Jean did not go home to his wife. Instead, he came to Sally, and Phil got into the same job search company as Bobby. Now they were working on the same floor. Bobby came to Jack and asked him for a job. He agreed to take him on the team, but so far I've only assigned the simplest tasks. Bobby worked tirelessly, and over time, Jack began to assign him more difficult work. Bobby got enough to feed his family. But I had to part with the old house. He and his wife and children moved in with their parents. When one of Jack's crew couldn't come to work, Bobby offered to hire his buddy Danny. He had the necessary skills. Danny had been without a paycheck for many months and was glad to be working again. Phil, on the other hand, couldn't accept being fired. His wife forced him to leave the house every morning and not return until the evening, so that the neighbors would not realize that he was now unemployed. It was hard for him, and Gene, no matter how hard he tried to help him, couldn't do anything about it. Bobby had a change for the better when he was assigned an interview at a large company. However, when he arrived at the meeting, it turned out that it was scheduled for another day, and he would have to return home. Phil also tried to make his way back to the top, but even old acquaintances refused to hire him. He was not suitable for senior positions in terms of age. Employers don't like paying for insurance. Realizing that he had nothing to catch, Phil came to the GTX office to throw stones at him. One evening, Phil realized that he had only one choice left. All his friends and acquaintances came to his funeral. Only Sullinger was missing. After the funeral, Gene took Bobby for a walk. They stopped by the old shipyards, and Gene told them how he and Sullinger started out. He liked building ships, creating something new, and when all this turned into numbers on pieces of paper, his interest in work and life slowly faded. Gene wanted to revive him, and he had a plan that he hadn't told Bobby about yet. And he finally turned into an exemplary family man. He played basketball with his son, did repairs with Jack, helped the children build a treehouse. One day Maggie called him to the phone. Gene called to discuss the collaboration. He decided to start building ships again and offered Bobby a position in his company. He went to talk to Jack. He suspected that his brother-in-law was suffering losses because of Bobby. After they talked, Jack advised Bobby to accept a new position at Gene's company. After all, this is what he really does. Bobby followed his advice. He agreed to Gene and returned to his old way of life. Only now everything was different. He understood what he was capable of if times got tough. Besides Bobby, Gene has brought back other GTX employees who were fired from Ally.